Agents of Slaughter back with another serial killer video. This one's quite cool because someone commented on a previous video of mine saying I should do Andrew Cunanan, and I never knew who he was. Googled that name and then it was like, he's the motherfucker that murdered Versace. So I was aware that, like, of his existence. This meant that I could put a fucking face or whatever to the name. So let's jump right into this crazy's story. Andrew Cunanan was born August 31, 1969, to Modesto and Marianne, the former a Navy veteran turned stockbroker. Cunanan was educated at the Bishop's School in La Jolla, California, a private school attended by students predominantly coming from families in a stronger financial position than his own. Many believe even by this stage Cunanan was showing signs of psychopathy and sociopathy, making up countless stories to explain his background, lying and exaggerating to, in his mind, feel more akin to his peers and therefore feeling that he fit in better with the crowd. He would also routinely change his appearance to suit current trends or what he deemed popular or attractive at the time. I don't think that last one's particularly different to almost fucking everybody else. He would tell people he came from Filipino royalty, and it generally appeared to everyone he may have came from some sort of privilege. He used several aliases: Andrew De Silva, Lieutenant Commander Andy Cummins, Drew Cunningham, and Kurt Matthew Demaris. I like the Lieutenant Commander one. Talk about inflated ego. Both of these behavioural characteristics, concocting a complex web of lies as well as harbouring an extremely narcissistic, self-centred mentality driven by vanity, are something relatively common along the serial killer spectrum, identified in fucking loads of cases. His roommate Eric Greenman would go on to say that he led a very elaborate lifestyle, and that at times he would believe the lies and versions of events that he would be relaying to other people. He was voted the most likely to be remembered in his high school yearbook, writing "Après moi le déluge," which means "after me the flood," a kind of chilling prelude to the serial killings he would carry out in the future. Cunanan was known to have a genius-level IQ of 147, putting him beyond the high end of the spectrum for which children are distributed or found when identifying the figure. Generally, all other percentiles are gauged up to and inclusive of 145. His brother Christopher, one of Andrew's three all-older siblings, was quoted as having stated that Cunanan had read through an entire collection of encyclopedias by the age of 10, and that their father identified Andrew as his pride and joy. Apparently, the family could ask Andrew questions relating to any issue of those encyclopedias, and he could remember all the answers. So I don't know if he had some sort of eidetic memory, but apparently he was really fucking bright, and they would literally quiz him on a range of subjects from these books, and he was just the shitwit. So yeah, he was seen as the kind of pride and joy, and he was even gifted a sports car, as well as being given the master bedroom in the family house, complete with its own ensuite bathroom. Cunanan's homosexuality was common knowledge among the whole family by the time he was 19. He was frequently a frequently a patron on the local gay scene, indulging in its nightlife. His religious mother had found out and was the last of the close relatives to know about his sexual preferences, although this was something that none of them ever recognised or acknowledged. It was around this time that Cunanan moved to San Francisco, where, via majoring in American history at the University of California, San Diego, before dropping out after a couple of years, he would step up his sexually deviant behaviour, apparently taking a keen interest in creating violent porn, although I did come across another source where some sort of FBI guy had refuted similar sounding claims, so I'm not sure. But his thing was to find a string of wealthy older men from the Castro district to leech off and use to fund a lavish style preset on the notion of being allowed domestic and international holiday trips at the expense of his sugar daddy, as well as being afforded monthly allowances and use of expensive swanky cars. He was completely obsessed with financial and social status. He would basically tell a mark what he wanted or what he believed they wanted or needed to hear in order for things to progress to a point that he feels fulfilled. He was flown to France for dinner, Aspen for a ski holiday, and afforded the offers of $800 an ounce caviar. I mean, what the fuck? $800 an ounce for some fucking whatever the fuck that shit is. It's like fucking eggs or some bollocks. He'd be given cases of champagne. He was lavished basically. He was a good looking bloke in the gay scene, and he preyed on them, and they got, I suppose, what they wanted as well for a time. He would go from one wealthy man to another, maxing out their credit cards and such like that, especially after the relationships had frittered away, ended. But for such an overtly complex character, Cunanan didn't take things too seriously. Where his personality lacked depth, the men he would pursue and become itemed with ultimately hadn't required more substance in their relationships. Fair enough, Cunanan was serious in the sense that he had a very specific and high standard on what was acceptable and how he wanted to be portrayed in social circles, but it all translates from that narcissistic ego thinking only really about himself. He loved those he loved, but these sociopathic cornerstones of his mind ultimately meant his gauge on his own self-worth was the implicit inner force driving him. Cunanan was also thought to have been dealing drugs such as opioids, coke and the devil's lettuce, the ganja. However, it would be his ongoing use of substances that would in part contribute to a changed perception of him among the groups with which he mingled and frequented. Basically, he had lost his looks, sort of let himself go, and this led to certain rejections, and that was something that he could just not handle. He absolutely fucking hated it, and it sent him a bit daft, I suppose. Being rejected or not found attractive, not being able to use these men because they don't want to use him anymore. I think Cunanan obviously had a severely unhealthy relationship with the materialistic shit in his day-to-day life, and his fulfilled feeling of self-worth came through those with excess money to flaunt accepting him, and the finer luxuries in life being basically bestowed upon him and just given away. Wager into that is pathological tendency for lying, chronic narcissism, but also very fragile because he's deep-rooted absolute need to not be rejected, to be seen as perfect or something like that all the time, and it just seems relatively apparent that something bad was going to happen. Jeffrey Trail, 28-year-old propane salesman, was believed to be, or having at one time anyway, been romantically linked with Cunanan. Cunanan beat him to death with a claw hammer. He hit him 27 times. Apparently there was blood all over the wall. It was an absolute mess, and this happened at the home of David Madison, another of Cunanan's previous lovers. Madison was not home at the time of the murder, but he did return later, having been out walking his dog. By the time Madison had returned, Jeffrey Trail had been rolled up in a rug, and then Cunanan took Madison hostage for a couple of days. Questions about how the murder of Jeffrey Trail came about remain up for debate and conjecture. Some think he wanted to punish Jeffrey, such was the brutality involved. 27 times being fucking smashed with a hammer. It's seen as a very personal type of murder. So, because of the believed romantic, intimate link between them in the past, some hypothesise that this was to punish him. Like I said, some have asked if Cunanan was on steroids at the time, as vials of the product were found at the crime scene as well. After that 2-day period of holding Madison as a hostage, Cunanan drove him out to the location where his next murder was going to take place. Madison was found dead through multiple gunshot wounds being sustained, 2 in the back of the head and once on the back, on the east shore of Rush Lake, which is close to Rush City in Minnesota. Madison is sometimes seen as perhaps embodying all of the rejection Cunanan had suffered over the previous short while, thus explaining what pushed a devastated Cunanan over the edge and onto this path, implementing a killing spree. David apparently meant everything to Andrew, one friend having been quoted as saying that Cunanan mentioned he would be happy to uproot and move away for David, if that had been something, I suppose, that came up in conversations within their relationship. So it kind of makes sense that Cunanan could look at him and visualise the single entity or metaphor for which he's going to vent and focus all his pent-up frustration and new rage, hatred, these negative emotions, and push it in that direction. The next day, May 4th, Cunanan drove to Chicago and committed his third murder, this time with no apparent connection between the two and later identified as a slaying of opportunity. 72-year-old real estate developer Lee Miglin was shot while cleaning his garage out. After carrying out the execution, Cunanan was said to have went into Miglin's family home, prepared and consumed some food, which was a ham sandwich apparently, shaved and finally took a rest. Again, to see the behavioural characteristics of a serial killer at play, to be so detached from the reality of the situation they've sort of just created, to carry out not just a single murder but 3 separate killings in a very short space of time, and to be so almost unaware of the severity of what's happened in the now, to then act in a manner more resembling that a grafter or anybody coming home from work at night. It just shows a complete lack of remorse or general give a fuckery. I also meant to mention earlier on that somewhere along the line, this series of events, Cunanan had managed to come into owning a gun that he stole from Jeffrey Trail's residence. So along this timeline, somewhere, I'm not sure, he manages to get a hold of the gun that he ends up using, as well as a box of hollow point bullets. Cunanan then drove to New Jersey, where he again shot to death another innocent, this time shooting William Reese, who was a cemetery worker, for the simple access that he would get and be able to steal his 1995 Chevy pickup truck. Ironically, by now though, the wheels had came off the Cunanan murder machine. The law enforcement agencies were on the hunt for him across the country, and his face had made it onto the list of the FBI's 10 most wanted men. He'd basically gotten sloppy and left a trail of, I suppose, evidence in his wake. People knew that it was him. People were out looking for him. Cunanan had heard on a radio broadcast that the police had been tracking his movements and whereabouts across the country following his use of a car phone in a stolen Lexus. He'd made a couple of calls. With signals pinging and rebounding off the radio masts as he travelled, police were able to basically pinpoint where he was. This information was leaked to the press, and it was running with that news piece that made him make his next curveball manoeuvre and turn around, head south of the current location where he was. He ditched that vehicle, and he knew that people were on him and that people were tracking him one way or another, so in that sense he made movements, he made changes, and he got a wee bit more clever. Cunanan holed up in a Miami dwelling, the Normandy Plaza Hotel, and stayed there for a couple of months, evading capture and honing his elusive credentials by again changing his appearance on multiple occasions. A hotel manager commented that Cunanan even wore wigs to confuse people even more to his look, or to try and throw people off. As much as this would obviously help conceal his true identity and let him at least leave his hotel room for, I don't know, needing to get food, perhaps. Thinking back to his extreme vanity and his innate desire to be seen as attractive and such, I wonder, or I can't help but feel anyway, that him having an opportunity, or being stuck in this opportunity anyway, where at least he could dabble with a multitude of looks and styles and images, you know, keep looking at himself in a mirror throughout the whole fucking process, might in some way have been appeasing to that narcissistic core within him. Versace's huge mansion was very elegant, massive, ostentatious, or in other words, pretentious as fuck, and always going to impress people. It was this big, grandiose fucking display, except it had genuine taste and character. It was built on the foundations of beautiful architecture and such. Versace was obviously the world-renowned, world-famous fashion designer, and he brought movies to the fashion, or the fashion to the movies as such, and he was basically seen as a pretty good dude. I think he gave a lot back, but he held a lot of famous friends and such, all them on the fucking rouge carpet. Anyway, for another gay guy in Miami, and with it a provocative and flamboyant gay scene, Versace's crib was seen as very much him and not forced, and it was just this big fucking great fucking place where I suppose people would go and party. It was decorated in gold with starlight chandeliers hanging. It had a massive outdoor pool complete with almost Roman Empire-like columns and a backset wall full of intricate chiselled stonework and such. Probably the stuff that Andrew Cunanan's wet dreams were fucking made of. On July 15, Versace was assassinated in front of the entrance to his mansion, shot twice in the head by Cunanan, who had simply approached him, walked up, and shot him twice. Cunanan had claimed to have briefly met Versace years prior at a low-key backstage cocktail party in 1990. Versace's family denied that this introduction to one another had ever happened, something echoed by Versace's partner, who also claimed that the pair were not in the slightest bit acquainted. However, people including the former lieutenant of the Miami Beach Police Department have questioned these denials, stating that they believe, with insistent conviction almost, that the pair must have met at some point, and perhaps had even been more than that they could quite feasibly have been entangled in some intimate sort of scenario. So, lots of questions remain. 20 years later, and people still sling theories and hypothesize about the motives behind Cunanan's serial killings, but those answers still seem to elude everybody. No one really has no tangible proof, evidence, nothing solid that they can fucking hold on to and look at and be like, there it is, there's the answer. It's all heresy, it's all people trying to piece together the likelihood of what was going on in this guy's head. For 8 days preceding the Versace murder, The authorities were hot on the trail of Cunanan, with media coverage being broadcast around the globe. Law enforcement would go on to draw similarities between Cunanan's chase and that of O.J. Simpson some years prior. Cunanan was cornered at a Miami boathouse where his corpse was eventually located, having committed suicide by means of gunshot to the mouth, out through the back of the head. It definitely sounds symbolic, at least. Such was his preferred method of execution in the murders that he'd left behind. Such was the pathological nature of Cunanan to lie and deceive others. People believe that had he survived and been apprehended, the veracity of any story given to him in response to questions relating to those motives would have been questionable at best anyway. So really, in the end, it's just more questions about this incredibly vain, narcissistic, sociopathic psychopath. That's all we've got, more fucking questions. Also, remember I mentioned they were asking if he could have been on steroids. Well, surely a posthumous investigation, like an autopsy, a toxicology report perhaps, could have answered that question pretty simply. That question actually came from, I think, a cop that I saw in an interview. But surely that would have shown up. So that leads me to believe that he would not have been roid raging, as surely if they had, they would have reported it, unless they wanted to remove any outside factors and romanticise his story and make it a simple, singular human study entirely, no outside factors, all Andrew Cunanan. After all, roid rage is definitely a thing that causes crazy fucking behaviour. Couple of people off the top of my head, the two that I think are, Tim Lambesis from Asley Dying, fucking banging band. He went through a rough period of his life where he lost his faith in his God, his marriage was falling to bits, he was taking a lot of steroids, and he ended up hiring an undercover cop to assassinate his wife. Obviously that never happened, it was a cop. So that's good. Selfishly, that's good because it meant he only got 6 years and he's out already, and his band's released a banging fucking album, and I love I love that band. But it's also good that, you know, he didn't fucking just hire an actual hitman to kill his wife and rob his own children of their mum. Crazy. But also the other one, Chris Benoit, the ex-WWE guy, who was 43 or something, and apparently the autopsy report indicated that he had the physical brain of an 80-something-year-old, and he committed a double murder of his wife and son, and then commit suicide by hanging himself from his workout station rack. So steroids definitely fuck people up, or they can do, or definitely contribute. So maybe Cunanan just wasn't on them, or maybe, like I said, just the story of this young, good-looking, flamboyant, fucking delicate but crazy about social, financial constructs and such, who was using older men as much as they were using him, and being outgoing in the lifestyle that he wanted to lead, and perhaps somewhere along the line getting a bit kinky with his sexual preference and violent pornos that I read that he maybe made. And, you know, that guy just going nuts at the end of all this love for people, where he feels shame or definitely rejection, and this love story turns sour and it becomes a fucking mad serial killing revenge story, and the last guy before the suicide to end it all was Gianni fucking Versace. That story sells. That's why there's Netflix shows about Andrew Cunanan, and people make docu-dramas about him where, and I may be wrong, but I don't think we're going to get a whole fucking TV series on Netflix about Tim Lambesis. Although to be fair, he never fucking had anyone killed. I'm just taking the piss now anyway. That's all I have for this video. Auf Wiedersehen.